Hello, my name is Douglas Bloch. I'm an author and a depression survivor. Welcome to another edition of One-on-One with a Depression Counselor. Today I want to start a series which I'm going to call Life in a Psychiatric Ward. I will be dividing this series into three parts. Part one will explore when it is necessary to be hospitalized for a psychiatric condition. Part two will talk about what to expect when you're on the ward. And part three will talk about the all-important transition from the hospital back into the world. Now, when most of us think of the term psychiatric ward or psych unit, it brings up a lot of uncomfortable feelings and a lot of negative terms such as loony bin, funny farm, nut house. You've all heard these. These are not very positive descriptions of a hospital setting. But there's a reason this happens, and that is that when we think of mental hospitals, we're often drawn to images like Bedlam in England in the 19th century, inhumane places where patients were often chained to their hospital beds and left to fester. Also, the film One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest reinforced this negative reputation of psych wards by showing a psychiatric ward being run like a police state under the dictatorship of Big Nurse. Fortunately, in the last 50 years, there's been a lot of positive changes in the mental hospital environment. And while I would never recommend it for your winter vacation, there are times when hospitalization is not only appropriate, but often life-saving. For example, when a person is in danger to themselves or others, it's really important they go to a safe place. We now know that suicidal ideation is temporary because it only comes on when the pain of depression is so intense the person thinks there's no way out. Once the depression has been resolved, the suicidal feelings go away. So it's really helpful to be in a safe container like a hospital until those feelings pass. The second instance in which hospitalization can help a person is when the person can no longer care for themselves and he or she has sort of become almost a vegetable. This is what happened with my mother in her late 70s when she dipped into a really bad depression and would sit around in bed, stare at the walls all day long, not eat, and simply ruminate about the upcoming songs of the cicadas that were going to come out after sunset. She was living in Florida at the time, and we had to fly down there. She had lost 40 pounds in 2 months, and my brother and I had to hospitalize her because she would have wasted away without it. And after a while, she came out of the hospital and was able to resume life again. The third instance in which going to a psych ward may be helpful is if a person needs a major medication change. A hospital can create a stable container where the person can be monitored while a psychiatrist takes the time to withdraw the person from the medications and add new ones. Also, in a perfect world, you could use a hospitalization as a safe house where you could take some time off a really stressful life, chill out, and basically recover in the same way that putting a splint on a broken bone lets the body's healing power take over healing without further injury. Unfortunately, this kind of going into a psychiatric ward just because you need a rest is not really practical with the demands of insurance companies to have it all diagnosed and coded. Now, the goal of going into a hospitalization, whether it's because of a suicidal episode or because you have a medication change or because you can't take care of yourself, it's always the same: to stabilize the patient and reverse the downward trajectory that got them into the hospital in the first place. Now, this was a lot easier in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s when the minimum stays in hospitals were usually between 1 and 6 months. In today's world of managed care, often you're given somewhere between 3 to 10 days, hardly enough time to catch your breath. Hopefully the hospitalization period will be long enough for your medication to take effect or your condition to stabilize. When this occurs, you can go back into the world to deal with the conditions that brought you there. Creating an aftercare program is critical to recovery, and I'll talk about that in part 3 of our series. In summary, hospitalization can be appropriate for people when they are undergoing a psychiatric crisis, when they're in suicidal pain, or they can no longer take care of themselves. Many of my patients who were hospitalized when they were suicidal or after suicidal attempts said their hospitalization experience proved to be a turning point in their recovery. So a case that comes to mind is a woman I'll call Barbara. She came to my Healing from Depression support group, fairly depressed. I asked her for her first week to basically do an assignment where she basically writes a vision statement of wellness. She came back the next week. She proudly showed me the vision statement, flipped the paper. On the back side was a suicide note. I said, "Are you kidding?" And she said, "No, I'm not." At that point, I called her psychiatrist, we got her into a hospital, and she was able to be stabilized in a couple of weeks, came back to the group and did fine just after that. I hope this video has been helpful to you. In the next video we're going to talk about how one actually gets admitted to a hospital and what to expect once you're there. A lot of this information is on my website, healingfromdepression.com, and in my book, Healing from Depression, 12 Weeks to a Better Mood. Until we meet next time, I wish you the best in your mental health recovery. Thank you.